Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Beyond the Wire podcast. I'm your host, Tim Keller. Along with me is my co-host, Matt Disher, and we'd like to welcome everybody to the new year. Hope everybody had a fantastic holiday, whatever holidays you decide to or not to follow. Either way, it's the holiday season, so we hope your holidays were fantastic. Hope your new year was safe, and you're joining us here on 2022. I will say, a little humble brag here, I have yet to mess up when typing or writing the date and putting that 21. Normally I have that like 4, 5, 6 week window where I'm constantly writing, the prior year's date. Like, oh God. Same thing when I change a password to something. If it's something that I need a password for on a daily basis, and every like 3 months we need to update passwords at work, for instance. That first like 4 or 5 days, I'm constantly entering the old one and my computer's telling me, no, that's not your password. What do you mean it's not my password? It's the same thing I enter in every day.
Listen, I've caught myself doing like 1997 recently. I don't know why when I'm writing a date and I'll write something like 1997, and it's really embarrassing. Nobody else sees it, but it's really embarrassing for me because I'm like, why am I writing 1997? The other thing I heard recently was somebody wrote it's 2022, and I'm like, what are you talking about? 2020 part 2? 2022. Let's hope it's not 2020 part 2.
2020 and 2.0.
Right. And I thought it was funny. I always love those things where people talk about Soylent Green. Apparently, I saw this the other day, the movie Soylent Green, which, if you're not familiar with this movie, it was filmed, I think it had Charlton Heston in it. It was filmed many years ago, but it turns out that in the future there's a food crisis of some sort, and they're all eating this Soylent Green. I don't know exactly what it is, but it turns out that it's made out of people, like recycled people. But I think Soylent Green is supposed to take place in 2022. So thankfully, I still got my Starbucks and my regular food, and we're not eating recycled people. But I think everybody can agree, since the beginning of 2020, I think we're about ready to get out of this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My kids, I think last night at dinner, it was last night, they said, we hope that 2022 is better than the past 2 years. And I go, well, if we're talking about the past 2 years, I'll give 2020 the nod. I said, because we had a couple months before everything went into lockdown. I said, all of 2021 was, COVID covered.
Yep.
Hopefully we start to work our way back out of this. Right. I know, new variants are flying around, and, there's a lot of people in healthcare issues right now. So shout out to the healthcare workers. You're doing an amazing job. Keep it up.
I have read a handful of articles, and again, I'm very conscious of the idea that a lot of what you see in the media and the news is not necessarily always accurate, or it's as we say, clickbait.
It might show a bias of some sort,
right? Or just a headline that does not actually reflect what's in the story. But I've seen a few things called like the beginning of the end. The Omicron variant is the beginning of the end, or that it's less severe. And of course, then the next story I read is, hey, record hospitalizations. I'm like, well, I thought it was less severe. Here's the thing, though. If it is less severe and that's the consensus, then that's the path we head in, right? Because I'm not a virologist. I don't know anything about these things, but I would venture to say that if we go the way of the common cold, that's the ideal situation versus the other way.
Yeah, I'd like to think that, whatever comes after Omicron is a slightly weaker variant, and then the next one's, it starts to step itself down, and hopefully we can work. I mean, golly. I mean, I know I just want this to be out from over my head, going to work every day and dealing with, everybody else and their issues and they, them being sick. It's not good.
And they're shortening the quarantine rules and the exposure rules and things like that, which gives me a little bit of hope. I think the other thing is, and again, I'm not an expert. I just looking around and observing, you've got record numbers of cases, you got record numbers of vaccinated people. I just feel like it's going to be one of these things we're all going to have to get it to get out of it. And vaccinated or not, you're going to have to get it. And that displays or presents some very unique challenges and some very unique uphill battles to run, especially if, let's say, 30% of the United States is not vaccinated. And if indeed the higher vaccination rate, the lesser hospitalization rate, if that is true, then, that's the way we have to go. But at any rate, there's no easy answer. And all this new data keeps coming out every day, and nobody knows, even the experts. And I'm not taking anything away from the experts by any means by saying this, but even the experts, I think, don't know what comes next or how we get where we're going.
They're trying to make their best educated guesses in a world they never thought or wanted to be in. I did, talking about new information that's coming out on a pretty regular basis. I saw something a couple weeks back where they were saying that based off of last year's big push, a lot of schools, I would venture to say 90+% of all schools across this country decided to kind of shutter their doors there for a bit, wrap up that school year at home. They're saying that children have essentially dropped on average of 20 IQ points from where they should be. Obviously this is affecting, lower income areas more than, elsewhere, for obvious reasons. Individuals in those neighborhoods don't have the same access, don't have the same ability to get to internet and Wi-Fi and things of that nature. So again, were all the decisions the right decisions? Probably not. But you had people had to make decisions, and really tough decisions, without a whole lot of historical data to back up those decisions. Right. And, we applaud those that were right. Hopefully the ones that were wrong, we've learned from, in case something like this would happen again in the near future.
When we do this hindsight thing with every situation. We did it with 9/11. We do it with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, as it's relevant to our podcast. I had the same conversation yesterday. I wonder if in 5 or 10 years, we will evaluate the reaction to all of this and say, very early on the lockdowns in March of 2020, I wonder if we go, hey, that was too early. Like, lockdown should have happened in the summertime of 2021, or maybe lockdowns didn't matter at all. And I'm just curious to see that hindsight data, or maybe we should have done more lockdowns, all of these things. But I know for a fact that I know very early on, the pediatricians, those networks of pediatricians were saying, like, it's going to be horrible for kids to be staying at home or schooled from home en masse, because it's the socialization piece. Sometimes they were talking about families, maybe broken families or abusive families, where their only escape was to get to school with their friends and teachers. I'm betting, or I'm hoping maybe, that's a much smaller percentage than larger.
Yeah.
But I do agree, the socialization of children is a big part of development. And when you take them out of socialization and you try to put them in front of a computer screen, at any rate, it's very easy for them. It's very easy for anybody to just sort of disengage and become effectively antisocial.
Yeah, absolutely. Since we're kind of talking about, wrong decisions, right decisions, in our pre-show back and forth, you had posted something on Facebook the other day of a film that's currently out on Netflix. It's called Don't Look Up. It stars Jonah Hill, Leonardo DiCaprio, there's a bunch of really big time.
Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep's in there, yeah.
Jennifer Lawrence. It has a star-studded cast with a lot of famous people in this movie.
Yeah, and as it went scene to scene, you're like, oh, look, it's that person. Oh, it's that person. But yeah, I would say that a very well-timed movie here. It has nothing to do with any sort of virus or anything like that. No pandemic, but it is a major issue brought to the attention of the government, and trying not to spoil anything here. To watch the powers that be essentially play ping pong with themselves back and forth, every time new information is presented, it's very interesting.
It was art imitating life. I wanted to see this. I wanted to see this really bad because I saw people talking about it on Facebook, and I saw people saying, well, is it biased one way or the other politically? Because you like to think, I think we all think, when you're watching films, when you're watching movies, when there's a message, you're like, well, what are we trying to say here? And I didn't get that from this. I was afraid I would get some sort of political bias. And what I saw was this. It was almost like criticism of everybody. And in the way, again, without spoiling, in the way that they're talking about a world-ending event, and people are more concerned with who the celebrities are dating.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, this is every day.
It's about, they take shots at the media, the way the media portrays this, when the individuals with the know, bring this information to them, and the media just kind of brushes it off their shoulder. the one doctor gets turned into, hey, you're the hot doctor. Just come on back because you're the hot doctor.
Right.
We don't care that you have this awesome information for us
Right.
that could save our lives. No, you're the hot doctor. Just come on in. The individual that plays the president does a great job of not really playing either side of the fence here. They could be left, they could be right. It doesn't matter. But it's a bunch of baboons. It's crazy.
So the quick synopsis of the film is that Leonardo DiCaprio is a professor of astronomy of some sort, and he even says in the movie that he studies dead gaseous universes or something like that, or galaxies. And Jennifer Lawrence is a PhD student in astronomy, and she discovers what appears to be this large meteorite or comet headed straight towards Earth, and we've got 6 months. And they try to take this information to the president. They try to take this information to the government and the media, and basically everybody just sort of says,
well, first we're going to drag our feet. So then we're going to, okay, screw it. We're going to take it to the media. And the media's like, well, let's talk about the new Kardashian boyfriend. And it's like,
there's an election coming up, and they're like, well, how do we use this for the election? Or how do we not talk about this for the election?
And I don't want to say it's a shot at Bezos or a shot at Elon, but they have a very wealthy entrepreneur that steps in and says, hey, why don't you let me and my space program do this? Because we've studied the comet, and there's, $2 billion worth of stardust that we can turn into microchips. And it's pretty appalling. And I'll say the last scene, I thought, I just kept thinking they'll figure it out. They'll find a way. And that final scene, it's the ones you love in a room together, and it's hey, if you have access to Netflix and you haven't checked it out, there's not a backbone political message to it. You're not going to walk away thinking, God, I can't believe they talked about my team like that or whatever.
Well,
I don't want to call it funny, but there's laughable parts to it.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's funny because it's art comically imitating life, and even Leo DiCaprio's character in the movie says that he's yelling at. He's like, some of you aren't going to believe me because of your political affiliation, because one party is saying that it's not happening and the other party is saying it is, and he's like, I'm telling you, we have the picture of it, and then suddenly the reason why it's called Don't Look Up is because the political campaign is run on Don't Look Up. Yeah. And one day everybody looks up in the sky and hears this thing hurtling towards Earth, and you can see it. But it's a great movie. It doesn't have anything to do with the military at all. No. It kind of it strays away from what we're doing here. But I thought it was appropriate because, we talked about this before, that sometimes in the news or all the time in the news, we don't see military engagements on the news anymore because we're acting like they don't happen around the world. And we do have thousands, tens of thousands of men and women in the U.S. military that are deployed around the world. A lot of them are in harm's way at any given time, despite the fact that you're seeing gunfights or not on the news. Yeah. And it follows in line with that whole thing that basically you see what they'll give you.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, we don't necessarily see a ton of, overseas action and things that's going on. But I want to say it was late December, there was a reconnaissance plane essentially spotted over Ukraine, in Ukraine airspace, which we know that, Russia has a large mass of what appears to be very ready and deployable troops at the Ukraine border. It's been a few months now where there's kind of been some backroom jockeying going on between the political powers that be between multiple countries. To my knowledge, this is the first time one of our military assets have been, at least found in that area. Now, the article I read, it didn't really give any sort of real detail as to what they were doing or what was going on, what they think is even going on. A freelance reporter found it. Saw the aircraft in the sky, took a photo of it, and the article kind of just details what these planes are for. And realistically, it's a Boeing 707 that's been outfitted with all sort of radar technology, able to see ground formations for about 250 kilometers. They can get low and slow moving aircraft, some radar technology from the ground they can pick up, vehicles, armament, things like that. But it's essentially something that can send immediate information to ground troops about what's ahead and what's going on.
I often wonder about this kind of stuff because I know we can read license plates from outer space.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, like, why are we flying an airplane over this? Now, again, I'm not an expert. I realize it's real-time information versus waiting on a satellite to roll around the right orbit.
Mm-hmm.
And in real-time command, like AWACS and things like that, has to happen to pick up aircraft and missiles and things like that. Here's the thing. It's my understanding that the United States, President Biden has said, pledged his support to the Ukraine against any aggression from Russia. And I don't know exactly how that looks. I don't know the politics of that, but I know that that's the conversation right now is if they're amassing troops and tanks on that border, the United States, I would venture to say that airplane's not invisible. It's not a stealth aircraft. It's probably saying, hey, we're here. Just so you know, we have advanced technology. This is the thing. Wars, while you still need manpower to fight battles on the ground anymore, a lot of it comes down to technology. And if you look back in history, in more recent history than the large tank battles of World War II, the United States effectively wiped out Saddam Hussein's Iraq tank force in Desert Storm, the first Desert Storm conflict. We effectively wiped out the tanks, the largest tank force in the world in like a day with aircraft and cruise missiles and our tanks on the ground. It was just a testament to what happens when you have superior technology on the battlefield. You can't wage war if you don't have control of the air. And if you do have control of the air, then you win.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right there. That it's probably just that, just a little wave, just a neighbor passing by, giving you
here.
Hey, I'm right here. So
it's not a bluff. And there are news stories right now. If you go in and Google it right now, both sides are saying, well, let's see who's bluffing. Let's see who's bluffing. Mm-hmm. And there have been troops operating in the Ukraine, not American troops, what they're calling like non-uniformed Russian troops operating in the Ukraine for a handful of years. If you recall a few years back, there was a civilian aircraft that was shot down over the Ukraine by some Russian separatists, I think is what they were calling. They call them that because they're not government sponsored. Mm-hmm. They're not wearing the flag on their shoulder, but that's what they were. And they fired a Buck missile, anti-aircraft missile at an aircraft. I think the story goes that they thought it was a military aircraft and they were going to go ahead and shoot it down. This is during hostilities. There's conflict going on the ground. And instead they shot down, a 737 or something along those lines and killed a bunch of people. So this has been going on for a number of years now. And it just hasn't escalated to the point where we're like, all right, let's put some troops on the ground.
Yeah. Matt, you just a few minutes ago brought up the big tank warfare that was part of World War II. And, anybody that has watched television over the past, 70 years, essentially, has gotten to know Miss Betty White. Betty White passed away this past week at 99 years old. So first off, what an amazing lifespan. 99 years old is absolutely amazing. But this week, there's some awesome photos right there. The U.S. Army put out a tweet that we are saddened by the passing of Betty White. Not only was she an amazing actress, she also served during World War II as a member of the American Women's Volunteer Services. I didn't know that she was part of some sort of, military, service. She did take some time away from her career, but in the 30s, she was a model. She hadn't got into the acting yet, but when World War II took off, she put her career on hold and joined the American Women's Voluntary Services. If you don't know what that is, I would suggest you go and look it up. But they did things like firefighting, ambulance and truck driving, aerial photography. Miss White's job entailed driving PX truck supplies to barracks in the Hollywood Hills, and she also attended dances for departing troops in the evenings. I would say that, hey, anytime I was ever deployed, we never got a nice send off with models of the time. So
the morale items are huge, and that's what the USO does a lot of this stuff. They host the concerts and things like that. And I think back then a lot of that stuff wasn't very well established at the point. So you needed any and every volunteer you could get from driving supplies to simply showing up and having interaction with people. We can all talk about this. Anybody who's been deployed, I remember my first deployment. It wasn't even specifically a combat deployment, But we were going overseas with the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, and I had this really strange pain in my gut. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I'm getting sick. There's something wrong with me. Came to realize it was just anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And it was anxiety because I had nothing else to take my mind off of the fact that here I am as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid about to be sent overseas into some pretty hostile territory. And I wasn't sure what was coming. And so it's those types of things. We can't undervalue the morale items of just being engaged and going to a dance. I know it sounds funny by today's standards, but that's what it was back then before you had movie theaters and video games and things like that.
Yeah, concerts and comedians. I know a bunch of comedians and musicians will go overseas and hold concerts. They'll do comedy shows. Bob Hope was a big proponent of this back in like the Vietnam era, going over, bringing some of his, well-to-do friends along with him, and, just trying to entertain the troops, doing anything to keep these individuals' mind off of, the daily tasks and things they have to do on a daily basis, and, make things a little less mundane.
So Betty White is one of these that, she shows up to the conversations. She was always sort of a comedian, just one of those go-getters, lots of fun to be around, lots of fun to have in the conversation. But the other joke was always that Betty White is older than sliced bread. And apparently sliced bread was invented or mainstreamed after Betty White was born. So, so Betty White was, as we all know, in the Golden Girls, the television show in the 80s and 90s, I believe.
Mary Tyler Moore show.
Yep.
Something Hot Cleveland or Hot in Cleveland, I think, was a show she most recently did.
But I believe she would have been 100 years old in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah,
so
just a couple of days.
Just fell short of her 100-year birthday.
But hell of a career. And like you said, she was always very quick-witted, and she was always trying to be as funny as possible. I know she's going to be missed by so many people in the entertainment industry. I do know that she was a huge animal lover and animal rights activist type of person. There's something going on social media where on her birthday, I want to say it's the 17th. Check me on that. I might be wrong. If you'd like, people just $5 in Betty White's name to your local animal shelter, things like that. So
super cool.
Yeah, super cool. So yeah, good afternoon to James as well, checking in on the chat there. Since we're talking about historical ladies and women that have made changes in the world, let's talk about the USS Abraham Lincoln's new captain. There it is. There's the photo of the aircraft carrier, and there is the photo of the captain. I'm gonna do my best not to butcher her name, but Captain Amy Bauernschmidt has assumed command of the Abraham Lincoln in August, and the ship is looking forward to depart with its strike group for a regularly scheduled deployment. And she will become the first female captain of a aircraft carrier out at sea. Just a fantastic accomplishment. It shows that, 30, 40 years ago, you'd have never even seen a female officer start to even kind of sniff these opportunities. We've come a long way. I'm sure there's still, ground to make up, but it's awesome to see that, something like this is being done and equality is really starting to, take change here.
Women are still significantly underrepresented in the U.S. military, and it's not necessarily by design. Maybe historically it was. And I mean that because historically, as we were talking about Betty White, she was in the volunteer corps back when the military was largely an all-male force. You weren't allowed to get into certain jobs, and until recently, really, there were a lot of jobs, or are still some jobs that women are not allowed into. So I know that the military over the last, let's call it 25, 35 years, has tried to be more intentional about moving the ranks of diversity, moving more women into different roles. And I think we're already seeing it. We're going to start seeing the results of those efforts. Again, I know that I want to say, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say that the whole U.S. military is somewhere around on average like 20% female. And so it's still largely underrepresented. Diversity numbers in the military, whole racial and ethnic diversity numbers in the military are pretty significantly good. In fact, I think they're either equal to or greater than the whole population of the United States. So there are some certain places they're doing well and certain places that they need a little bit more work. But again, historically, the military has always been a male-dominated industry. So it's good to see that some of these changes are taking place and we're seeing them firsthand.
Yeah. Captain Bauer-Schmidt graduated with a bachelor's degree in ocean engineering from the Naval Academy in 1994. She was part of the first graduating class in which women were allowed to serve aboard combatant ships and aircraft. In 1996, she graduated from the Naval War College with a master's degree as a naval aviator and has over 3,000 hours of flight service. So she's been doing this for a long time, highly decorated, highly motivated. It's good to see when good people succeed. And Captain Bauer-Schmidt, congratulations. Hey, I wasn't aware that you took over the command of the ship back in August, but it's fantastic. You're now going to make history in your current role. So, you know what? We'll wait till the end of the show to do the last article. But Matt, you wanted to talk about the Skillbridge program. This is something you deal with on a almost daily basis in your current role, in your profession. If you're not aware of what the Skillbridge program is, essentially, Corporal Tim is looking towards his last year in service. A, I'm hoping I get promoted to sergeant. B, I got to start formulating a plan. If I don't plan to re-enlist, what am I going to do when I get out? I have a few ideas. I have a few things I'd like to probably try. It'd be real nice if maybe I could try one of these things before I got out. And the Skillbridge program is essentially this program that allows individuals that are looking to exit their service with the military and afford them the opportunity for up to 6 months working for a prospective, employment.
Yeah.
And you get to spend 6 months working for a company being, an engineer tech, or, you could go be an accountant, something like that. Whatever it is, whatever suits your needs and things, something you like to do. You find these things on the Skillbridge program. You then have to go to your command and say, hey, this is something I like to do. They would hopefully find the time to let you go from your last 6 months of service, and you go spend your last 6 months as part of the DOD, working for this company. So on day one, if you're a good fit, you get offered a job and you're stepping right into a new role that you like and hopefully love and turn into a career. But Matt, what's going on right now with the Skillbridge program?
Yeah. So on this podcast, historically, we've had conversations with Andre Wood, who was a Skillbridge candidate. We've had conversations with Candy Tillman, who is the leader of 50 Strong, who is right now, in my opinion, leading the conversation around how Skillbridge operates in corporate America. So, Tim, great summary of what Skillbridge is. This is the thing. It started out as a program. And if you go back in time, people leaving the military have always had this disparity. It's always been a little bit harder to hang up the uniform and come out and go work inside of an organization because
starting from zero.
Yeah. Well, in a lot of cases, the military, don't get me wrong, it trains and produces some of the best talent in the world, which is why I lead the program
for the military.
Right. For the military. Well, and even beyond that, if you're able to interpret what those skill sets are, I use a machinist mate in the Navy. If somebody who keeps a ship running or a submarine running can very certainly keep a building running. Like it's some of the best talent in the world. An operations manager in the military can very well operate an office or an operation inside of corporate America. So you get the best talent in the world, but sometimes for the candidate and for the company, meeting each other it's going on opposite sides of the highway, and they're meeting each other coming and going. And if you look at the stats going backwards in time a little bit, the Army at one point in time, and I believe it was somewhere near the end of the last decade, looked at their unemployment numbers, the unemployment payout. So when you leave a job or get let go from a job, you get unemployment benefits, and you can collect money from the state or the federal government, however all that works. And I think the Army looked at this and said, we're paying out like billions of dollars for people leaving the Army every year. And again, I don't have those stats right in front of me, but it's a large number. I believe it had a B in it. And so we're talking about billions of dollars, and like, well, what's happening here? Why are there so many people coming out of the military and not being prepared? and ending up collecting unemployment. This goes backwards in time for 100 years.
Mhm.
I remember watching the show The Pacific. It was an HBO show about the guys, the Marines fighting in the Pacific during World War II. And in the last episode, one of the main characters, I believe his name was Eugene Sledge, comes back to the United States. He's doing his checkout process, and he's sitting down with like a career counselor, and this is in 1945. And they say, well, what are you good at? And he's like, I'm good at, quote unquote, killing people. That's what he did in the military.
Mhm.
Now, granted, I realize today's U.S. military is about 13 to 15% infantry. So most people are not doing, or I'm sorry, 13 to 15% combat arms. Most people are not doing combat jobs in the military. And so those equal to, in many cases, transferable skills to people leaving the armed forces, hanging up the uniform, and coming out and working inside of companies. And so they developed these opportunities, and we say 6 months. They're allowed to leave or basically get orders to go work at a company as an intern for the last 6 months of their military service. And really, most of them aren't even getting 6 months. They're getting 3 months, 4 months. If you think about the last few months of your military service, for most people, it's kind of like doing the last 2 weeks at a job.
Mhm.
You're not really 100%. In the military, there's a unique process of checking out too. It's
Mhm.
going to medical, making sure that you're all in one piece, making sure that they have all your medical records documented, making sure that you're turning in all your gear, and that you're not leaving any open-ended issues. And so that's typically what happens for a person in their last handful of months in the military. What's happening right now, given all these benefits, right? This is a great opportunity for people to leave the military and then go to social media and brag about the great jobs they plugged into. I've said this before, it in and of itself is an advertisement for the U.S. Armed Forces.
Mm-hmm.
If it's kind of like an Ivy League school, when everybody graduates from that Ivy League school and they go get a big 6-figure job or a 7-figure job, everybody wants to go to that school, right? It's kind of like, I always joke around about this, Ohio State football, such a winning team, right? That your football players from high schools, when they have the opportunity to go to any of these Big Ten schools or any of these big football programs, like, who are they going to pick first and why? So it's the same sort of logic. What's happening right now is that we're seeing sort of an epidemic of command level elements not approving the Skillbridge time for their transitioning service members. And it's for a number of reasons. It's a manpower shortage. Hey, if we let you go, then we're short X amount of people and we need the operation. My argument to that again is that you're talking about somebody who is a short timer now, as we call it, a short timer, last 3 or 4 months in the military. Let them go have a successful career transition out of the military. But I think the disparity here, it's a conversation a lot of us are having on this. The Skillbridge program and the support level at a national level is great. It's great. You've got people that are rooting for this. They really want it to work. Companies are pouring resources. We're one of them. We're pouring resources into this because it represents a significant talent portal for us to get the best talent in the world. It represents cost savings. It represents all of these different things. We're able to train somebody now on a job when they have 75% of what we need. We can give them the other 25% during this time as they're an intern, then offer them a job. It's a test drive for them. It's a test drive for us. Everybody benefits from this. And again, it solves the age-old problem. I would have kicked doors down had I had a program like this when I was leaving the Marine Corps. It took me roughly 3 years when I got out of the Marine Corps to really figure out what I should be doing. And I know that sounds, part of it was immaturity. I was young. The other part of it was, I'm going to college. Well, what do I do next? I have no idea. I wasn't making a good income. I was working bartending jobs, which were great. I made good money. But the problem was that wasn't progressing me into my career.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, we have a bit of disparity, perhaps a misunderstanding among the command levels that are essentially not allowing their troops and their soldiers and sailors and airmen to take the Skillbridge opportunity for any number of reasons. And I've seen this more abundantly in the younger ranks, like the 4-year, 8-year candidates who are like, hey, I'm about to hit 4-year mark. I'm 3 months out from it. Commander won't let me do Skillbridge. And these are degreed people who have a great opportunity to go plug into something out in the corporate space. But, I rarely bring the subject up because I don't like to portray the veteran community as broken, because I heartedly disagree that they're not broken. We've had some bad media when we talk about veteran suicides. But this is one of those items when you set people up for financial and career success, all of the other pieces fall into place. If you take away financial and career success, that is, in my opinion, what leads to mental health issues, what leads to veteran suicides, drug use, alcohol abuse. I think that applies for people not in the military too. Mm-hmm. If you simply don't have opportunities and you're not given or afforded opportunities, it's very easy to fall on your face or take desperate measures. So that's my pedestal real quick about Skillbridge. We've talked about this at length on this.
So how do we fix this? How do we start?
It's an education piece. Back to the command elements. This is the thing we have to remember in the military. Every year or 2 or 6 months or 8 months, the command elements, the higher ranking people are switching out. Mm-hmm. Like you don't have a division commander for 10 years. Like in a company, you have a CEO for 5-10 years, right? You look at some of the biggest companies in America. Jeff Bezos was the CEO, the founder CEO of Amazon for the entire time that I can tell you when Amazon
30 years
existed.
now.
Right. Elon Musk, Tesla. Scott Farmer, Cintas, all these companies, you have these family names of this person who's been running the operation at the helm, so to speak, driving the bus for a number of years. The military doesn't operate that way. The military is, people are constantly moving, command levels are constantly moving, commandants are changing. And I'm not talking about commandant, I'm not talking about high level leadership levels. I'm talking about brigade commanders, company commanders, battalion commanders, that level. The people that are in these jobs for a year or so, and then they leave. To answer the question, Tim, I think it's an education campaign that has to go back out to the armed forces. Again, though, if you ask the armed forces, if you were to go to the Pentagon and say, hey, why isn't this working? Or why are we having these disparities? The answer, in all fairness, is it's not the Pentagon's job. It's not the Department of Defense's job to create career opportunities for people after the military. Their job is to act as the Department of Defense and to act as the military. So there's this strange piece in the middle where we, the employers, we, the influencers, have to try to get to those decision makers to kind of share the exact message that I just said, that this cuts down on all of the historical issues that everybody transitioning out of the military has ever had.
Yeah.
And it might look to some people like you're going to lose manpower. And in some cases that might hurt them. And I understand that. In some cases, it might look like somebody's just trying to get out of the military early, but let's just be honest. In the last 3-4 months, we're not doing much anyway.
You're getting 60% of that person,
right?
You know,
right. And they're spending time checking out. So it's I don't know if there's a reward system or something like that. I wish that just like employers, we have to check back in with the DoD when we talk about Skillbridge. We have to check back in every year and say, here's how many people we brought through the program. Here's what happened to them. Here's our success rate, et cetera. It might almost behoove the DoD to have a similar report and say, well, here's how many people we processed out.
How many people from this command has taken the chance on this opportunity? If, a specific command, says, oh, we've had 0 people enter the Skillbridge. Do your people not know about it? Did you have 10 apply and all 10 got turned down?
Right.
Why hasn't anybody gotten through the Skillbridge program? But Matt, I think you brought up a great point, because you're taking individuals that, at least for the minimum for the past 4 years, have really truly had a purpose to their life, to their day-to-day has had a great purpose. Falling out of the military without any sort of purpose. You mentioned it took you about 3 years. Some people it's, a lot quicker. For some, it's a lot longer,
right?
Till you start even to find that lane, that back road that you're like, hey, this is going to lead me to that highway that's going to be my career. So you have individuals that have a sense of purpose, that wake up every day knowing what they got to do and what they should be doing. And all of a sudden they wake up, I don't have anything to do.
Right.
I have no idea what to do. Where do I even start?
And again, we talk about one of the big glaring pieces for me has been that the military, the respective branches spend millions of dollars on advertising to get people in the doors, right? And the military has been shrinking for a number of years, and the ranks have been harder to fill. And it's my understanding that some of the branches have not met their recruiting quotas for a number of years. I don't know if that's still current or if it was just a few years back, but there was a period of time where the branches were like, we simply can't fill our ranks because there's not enough people who want to come join the military. It may have been because we were in combat operations and people were just like, hey, I don't want to go join. But at the same time, you could probably do away with millions, tens of millions of dollars of advertising budget. Again, if everybody hangs up the uniform and comes out successfully, that in and of itself it's like J.C. Penney. I realize that that's a funny reference to us today because J.C. Penney is not Target or Walmart, but J.C. Penney was at one point one of the most successful department stores in the world. And J.C. Penney himself at some point in time said, you want to be such a good business-oriented business that your advertisements are people giving good reviews. It's people telling other people to come here or people telling other people to come here and shop instead of spending tons of money to get people to know you. You want to have a good reputation. I'll touch really quick. Billy Flagg's on our team here. I work closely with Billy. If losing one person equals mission failure, the mission was already failing. He's absolutely right. Billy is a product of Skillbridge that transitioned from a recruiting role in Skillbridge to a recruiting role among my team in our company. And so he recently accepted the full-time offer and came on board full-time. So a great example of somebody who spent a handful of years in the military, has a family, and used that transition piece, used that Skillbridge piece to now plug into something without having to look around and say, well, what do I do next for 2 years?
Yeah. Yeah. And, good on Billy. That's like you said, Matt, he's dead on right with his comment there, but it's great to have somebody in that role that has absolutely gone through that same program that these individuals are trying to go through. If for nothing else, he can hand out some pointers. Hey, you might hit a snag here, you might hit a snag there. These are things to look out for. Here's things that work for me. So
right.
Yeah, absolutely. So Billy, thanks for checking in very much. So hey, command, personnel, people in charge, make better decisions. Okay. Make better decisions. I'm looking at it.
Yeah. And I think it's just an understanding of all the benefits for your service member, all the benefits. And I realize, there are 5 sides to every story, right? So some of these commanders might not really have the visibility on it. And that's just it's a piece we as employers and we as the influencers probably have to do a much better job of educating, in terms of what this means, what the future reference of this means for your service member who's hanging up a uniform. We should be just like a manager of people. If one of my solid team members leaves, I am invested in that person's success for years. And you can ask anybody I could name a handful off the top of my head, people that I have reported to me over the years. They've asked me for reference letters later on. They've asked me to talk to their bosses or their future bosses and things like that. It's the same. Should be the same mentality of leadership. It's train these people. You work alongside of them. Look out for their best interests moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, I think the comparison between, we'll just use Harvard, or you know what, we'll use Penn, because right now my daughter's starting to look at colleges. She recently asked me about Penn. She wants to be a vet tech. And I told her Penn's a very prestigious school. It's a very tough school to get into. I said, you have put yourself in a fantastic position with your grades and all your extracurricular activities that, you could probably be on the short list for them. Not guaranteeing you're going to get in. Now, granted, there's a certain cost that goes to going with a school like that. But there's also on the back end, you and individual that went to a smaller school, a lesser known school, apply to the same job. They're going to see that you have a degree from Penn. Both of you have no work experience. They're going to say, wow, that's interesting. They'll probably take a little, at least an extra second to look through you, dig a little deeper on you maybe. And I said, it's going to at least, jar that door open just a little bit extra for you. And then at that point, once you're into the workforce, it's about, your skills, abilities, and how hard you're willing to work. I said, so that all comes down to you. I said, but a place like that's going to increase your chances. Same thing with the Skillbridge. The more individuals that go through this program that find success, become individuals like Billy there, and are able to pass that word along to other folks and say, hey, I was kind of on the fence about joining the military, but this is a fantastic program. If you don't think that college is maybe necessarily the road you want to take, you can go to the military. You learn those skills there, and we can kind of get you in the driver's seat to where you want to be in a career.
This is, if you go back in time, companies started offering benefits like healthcare and things like that, and weekends. I know it sounds funny, like weekends weren't a thing before certain companies started saying, like, hey, I think it was Henry Ford, who honestly was like, you're going to have weekends. And the idea was he wanted to pay people before the weekend. They'd go into the weekend and go buy one of his cars. And they'd work there and buy the car, et cetera. I don't know if that's a tall tale, but at the end of the day, a lot of these companies, if you look at company benefits now, companies offer more and more traditional and non-traditional benefits. Some companies offer, they're going to reimburse you for college. They're going to pay for your MBA. Like those are things that are costly, right? But it benefits the company to have those. The military is the same way. It's not different. The GI Bill, for example, is an offering for benefits. Like come sign up and we'll pay for your college after you're done serving or during your service time. That's a benefit. They don't have to offer that. It just gets more people in the door. It's the veteran benefits thereafter, although this is a lot of legislative stuff. But when you get injured in the military and they pay for your injuries for the rest of your life, or they give you treatment for the rest of your life, that's a benefit. It's a traditional or non-traditional benefit. The same thing could probably be said of anybody who wants to go work for any prestigious company out of college. They go to a prestigious college and they go work for a prestigious company. It's all a resume builder of, it's good for these companies when they get top talent in the door. The military is not exempt from this. When you get top talent in your doors and those people go out into society after the military and make a big difference and they become influential people, the military should really lean on that and say, wow, these are like alumni of our ranks. Mm-hmm. And I don't think right now that's a conversation that's happening. It might just be the way that it's organized, but I don't think it's a conversation that's happening among those ranks, and it obviously should be happening.
Yeah. Well, hopefully that education piece does get to, those unit commanders and more individuals get these opportunities. Cause like you said, Matt, kicking a door down to get that sort of opportunity back.
Man, I'll tell you, I would have clawed my way into opportunities. I distinctly remember dropping my resume off at 100 places. This is back before the internet was largely being used for application.
There was no
processes.
electronic way to do it that everybody was using on a daily basis.
And when I came out, I went through TAPS program, the SEPS program at Camp Pendleton, and we got recruited heavily by the insurance companies and by law enforcement. And that's what it was. So I did an application for the Secret Service and I did an application for the California Highway Patrol. And I honestly thought I was going to stay in California and be a California Highway Patrolman. It just didn't move fast enough. So I went back home. And there weren't a whole lot of opportunities. So I got home, and fortunately, Jeff Ruby's a restaurateur here in Cincinnati. He's got a lot of restaurants in Louisville and Lexington, 5-star steakhouses. Jeff Ruby hired me, first interview to work in the bar. And I made enough money to kind of pay the bills and things like that. But that was it was one of these things where I really had no direction post-military. And it was because nobody had recruited me. There was no recruiting process back then. Nobody was banging your door down trying to get you. Now here we are with the advent of social media, Indeed, LinkedIn. I can go in there and find you. If you've got the skill set we're looking for, I can go in there and find you. And even better, an added bonus for the company, again, a test drive for both parties, is if you are eligible to do Skillbridge and if your commander will approve you for that. That's huge. That can make the difference between making or breaking your career path, your entire future.
Yeah. So great little topic there. Last news article we have pulled up this week is about North Korea. North Korea has fired a suspected ballistic missile into its eastern waters on Wednesday of last week. South Korea and Japanese militaries said the first launch is the first one in about 2 months amid a long dormant international diplomacy on the North's nuclear program. This comes a week after Kim Jong-un vowed to further boost his military capacity at a high-profile ruling party conference last week. Just another notch on his belt, another one that has been a long game of, like we said, kind of showboating and puffing his chest out, saying we're gonna build our military, we're gonna be the biggest and baddest in the area. Kind of a standoff here between Kim Jong-un, who's now been in power for 10 years since his father's passed away, and he's assumed control of the country. But yeah, we're now through 3 different presidencies that have had to interact with Kim Jong-un as the leader of North Korea. So I guess, this puts obviously South Korea, but it also puts Japan within striking distance of North Korea. Obviously, China would be as well, but I don't think they have anything to worry about from North Korea.
Well, I think that they're friends. I mean, they're clearly friends. This is strategic for us. These are 2 historical strategic allies, South Korea and Japan, sitting nearby. And I distinctly remember the conversation when I was stationed in Japan that at any moment we could be boots on the ground in North Korea. I will tell you that one of my platoon sergeants, when I was very early in my Marine Corps career, said something to the tune of, North Korea has been waiting for us for 50 years. So if we were to, or for 70 years, if we were to show up there, and even with our advanced military forces, it would be a massacre for us. And I know that people in the military don't like to hear that, but it's tunnel network after tunnel network of an entirely indoctrinated population of people. Everybody will pick up a gun. Everybody will be a fighter. It's not going to be winning hearts and minds. It's going to be fighting the entirety of this country. And they will all be hidden behind, not to quote there will be a gun behind every blade of grass. One of the Japanese leaders said that after the attack of Pearl Harbor, and why they could not invade the United States. There would be a rifle behind every blade of grass or something like that. The same applies for North Korea. And so I've always thought, as a simpleton, I've always been like, well, why don't we just leave them alone and stop giving them the media attention? But we can't, because they are so closely butted up against some of our allies. And the Pacific, that space in the Pacific Ocean, on that Western Pacific side, is so strategically valuable to access the rest of the world. We have to either kind of play nice or show force. I'm not sure. It's been going on for a long time, though.
I was going to say we've I think the Obama administration was doing a pretty decent job of playing both sides. They were nice when they needed to be nice, and they were a little stern when they needed to be more stern. President Trump's stance was a little more hardline, with sanctions, and we're just not going to deal with you. You get out of line, and there was a threat here, a threat there. The Biden administration seems like they're a little more open to playing, the nice guy role. Hey, listen, we'll lighten some sanctions. We might deal with you a little bit better if you kind of back off the nuclear stuff. Obviously, I don't think this leader tends to listen to either one of those routes very well. He doesn't care if you're playing hardball. He doesn't care if you're trying to be nice. I do know, I would assume that with the current climate over there in North Korea, it's been said that the economy of North Korea has been battered severely by the coronavirus pandemic, the sanctions, and mismanagement. But despite all that, nobody suspects that Kim Jong-un is losing any sort of control over there in his country. And this guy seems like he doesn't really reason well with either way.
Well, and this is the thing: if you look at this from a big picture, and nobody benefits in the long run. It's the same conversation we have about every day. There's some new topic about China or Russia or something. Like, nobody benefits from conflict in those cases. Like, we are not going to benefit. We're not going to gain anything by going to conflict, going to war, going to blows with North Korea. Nor will they benefit. Everybody will greatly suffer. They probably worse than us, because they stand to lose everything. But the thing is that we keep doing this because our allies are nearby. And again, there's a lot of historical reference. There's a lot more going on than, again, the simpleton view of we could just leave them alone. But nobody benefits from anybody going to war with each other. And every once in a while they launch a missile. Don't get it wrong, though. We're doing the same things. Like, we're launching missiles. We're driving aircraft carriers past North Korea. Like, we're also out there doing the same things. It's just that we all pretend like, hey, it's okay if we do it. It's not okay if everybody else does it.
Yeah.
And I think that the worry is that, and they've tried to classify Kim Jong-un's father and his father before him like this, that they were sort of wild cards, and that they have their finger on the trigger at any moment. If you're in a hermit kingdom that has nothing to lose, at any moment you could just launch a nuke, and that's that. But I don't think, from the sake of control, if you look at the controlling interests here and the people who have been in control, they don't benefit from launching a missile at anybody. That will be the end, and it'll be the end for a lot of people. And I don't think there's no winning in this. In other words, so it's kind of an interesting situation that it pops up in the news from time to time.
I think you're pretty much dead on there. This is in the news because it is close to some of our allies, and we are there for the same reasons. But North Korea feels safe also doing these things because their ally to their immediate north, China, is like that all-state wrestler who just happens to be your big brother.
Right.
And nobody's going to necessarily bully you in school because they don't want to deal with your big brother.
Right.
So you can kind of maybe be a little bit of a turd and, get away with a little bit more than you probably should. If you were doing the same things, maybe one of the other kids might set you straight.
Right.
But they know if they take a swat at you, that all-state wrestler's coming down and he's going to, probably beat you up pretty good. And you just don't want to, you don't want to deal with it. It's not going to be good. So we'll just try to ignore you and let you go.
Right. So. I think there's some proxies in there too. Like, when they talk about proxy wars, like fighting a war between two of your friends, so you're not fighting the war yourself. I think there's some of that too, like people acting as each other's mouthpieces. Like, we do a lot of, this is the thing. This is what I've never understood about the relationship with China. We do a lot of business. There are a lot of really good things that come out of that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Politically, we're not seeing eye to eye, but economically and industrially, we're like, you look on your desk right now, everything is made in China.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a couple of benefits we get out of that is that we get products that are cheaper than producing them right down the street here in the United States. And that to the bane of some people, we're like, well, we should produce those here. Well, then you look at environmental restrictions and pollution and stuff like that. We don't have that stuff being produced in the United States because it produces so much pollution that we just overseas, we ship it somewhere else, and then somebody else becomes the factory. That's a good or bad thing. It's still bad for the whole world. It's still bad for the environment, but it's good for the air that we breathe here in our neighborhood.
Absolutely.
It's this is the strange world of politics that, at one point in time, I went to college for this, right? I got a political science degree. I'm like, I want to understand more about how these things happen. And I understand less and less every day. I understand what I see. I know the politics of the conflict,
mm-hmm.
but I always, it's a lot of times it seems like to the everyman, it's just jockeying for world control. It's just saying, well, we want to be able to float our aircraft carriers through here without you getting mad at us. And the other country's like, well, we're mad at you. And it's like, so
why?
Right. So let's sit here and stare at each other and point fingers when, effectively and economically, we're all friends, and it would destroy either one of us if we were to go to blows again. It would destroy one or the other or both of our economies and industry.
Yeah.
So, it's like you and your neighbor being on the same water pipe, and if one of you breaks the water pipe, you both go thirsty and you both die. And it's like you're both hanging on the same rope and one's threatening to cut the rope.
Yeah. And me and my neighbor are both standing outside holding an axe to said water pipe.
Right.
Well, if you do it, I'll do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And nobody wins. Nobody benefits from it. So, I in my younger age, when I was in the military and, I was stationed in Japan for some time, I'm like, let's go to war with North Korea. Let's go show them what we got. And it was me being a naive, you look at your governments and you look at conflict over time. The Iraqis became the enemy at one point. And if as an older person now, as a 40-year-old now, I look back and I'm like, why were the Iraqis the enemy again?
Yeah.
And I don't mean that like, why did we go to war against Saddam Hussein? I understand the history of that whole conflict, but the Iraqis, the people became the enemy at one point. And I'm like, when did this happen? Like, these guys they're not our enemies. Yeah. So it's people of Afghanistan. They're not our enemies. We were fighting the Taliban. We were fighting a subsect of tribal,
a small slice of the pie.
Right, of extremism, I guess. Yeah. So we tend to do this too. The media drops these subtle hits sometimes that we should be like that. The people of North Korea are our enemy, and I'm like, well, it's not. It's more political. It's just like the people of the United States are not North Korea's enemy. I want nothing to do with the people of North Korea. Yeah. I want nothing to do with you. I don't have any bad blood. I don't have any bad blood with somebody in another country, unless you're gonna, come fight me and my all-state wrestler, my friend down the street.
Yeah. It is interesting that, like you said, it seemed like there for a while that the people of Iraq were our enemies, and living on the East Coast, in the greater DC area, there for a while, a lot of individuals from a lot of other countries end up in that, they look at America and they think Washington, D.C. And so that's where a lot of these people that come to this country nowadays end up migrating to. And I've worked with, and have personal relationships with a handful of Iraqis, two of them brothers that came over from Iraq. And it was always fun to watch those two go at it like brothers. And, they start speaking the Iraqi dialect at each other, and I always giggle at that.
If you recall, and I remember this distinctly because it recently happened again with a different group, but right after 9/11, there was this anti-Middle Eastern, anti-Muslim or anti-Islam sentiment and sentiment. My bad. And it was just sort of, I don't know where it progressed, bearing in mind this was before social media. So people, it just was this, like you see on the news.
Just a lack of understanding and knowledge and fear of the unknown.
The store owner down the street in New York City was attacked by somebody because, he had an accent. And we saw this soon after the coronavirus pandemic unrolled. And it's anti-Asian. Right. And it's like, who's creating that? Where does that come from?
The lady in your market has nothing to do with this.
Right.
It just so happens her ancestry takes her back to a certain Asian country from wherever it is.
Right.
And she's now lived in this country for 60 years and you just happen to see her. Yeah. She has nothing to do with it. Leave her alone.
I'm a big history buff. You recall in Hawaii, in some places in the United States, they locked up Japanese Americans in camps. In camps after Pearl Harbor, because they were like, oh, you're now our enemy. And all these people were like, I'm a dentist down the street.
Yeah.
Like I don't have anything to do with.
Your kids were just in my office last week. What are you doing?
Right. And it's that kind of thing where I realize like this happens in every country. It happens all over the place, but I do feel like sometimes it's the stories that are shared out there that the everyday person on the street has no business playing in the politics of conflict. And thusly the media should not be saying like, look, North Korea is the enemy, because then it just draws this conclusion like, we're gonna have to fight all those people. I should hate them because they're not. But in reality, like, why would we ever hate anybody from that country? Because they're probably not thinking of us, or they're brainwashed to hate us. I don't know, but there's a little bit of there's always that, like,
their Matt and Tim over there don't care about this Matt and Tim sitting here right now.
Right.
And we really shouldn't. Not that we don't care, but like.
But when I say don't care,
I have no issue with their Matt and Tim.
Exactly. Exactly. And I'm not thinking about that person. I'm not thinking about how I should be mad at somebody because somebody else told me to be mad at somebody.
Yep. Absolutely.
These are, by the way, these are the lessons that I teach my 10-year-old. Yeah. It's the same exact conversation that I think adults forget sometimes.
Yes.
That we are judging books by covers, and we're also giving into influence of other people. It's like peer pressure.
Mm-hmm. If you want to see decision makers act like children, go to Netflix and watch Don't Look Up.
Oh man,
it's crazy.
I'll tell you what. So the guy that directed that, I think he's the same director from like Anchorman and a handful of other movies, Adam McKay.
Yeah.
But then Jonah Hill's character in this film, I mean, I realized like I like Jonah Hill in real life. Like I think he's funny. Mm-hmm. And I know he was in Wolf of Wall Street with Leo DiCaprio, right? So like I realized that halfway through the movie, like they did that movie together too. His character in Don't Look Up is so annoying. Like he's the most annoying person that I've ever seen in a movie. Like where
he pulls it off greatly,
perfectly. But he's just his very existence.
Oh, we'd all be rich. That'd be terrible.
Right. But it also makes me like think about like there are probably people like that for real.
Yeah.
And it's just, oh man, he just drives me nuts. But
what do you mean we can't frack and poison all the local drinking water?
Right.
We're gonna be rich. Who cares?
Right. Oh man.
I don't know. Maybe the people that live there.
Right. So. He is. I'm gonna have to watch that movie again because I got interrupted a couple times. I'm gonna watch it again and just.
He plays a fantastic sleazeball in that movie.
Yep.
So.
Yep. It's absolutely right.
Again, if you haven't watched it, check it out. But hey, once again, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays. Thank you for checking us out. Let a friend, family member, the guy down the street, your big brother that's the All-State wrestler. Let him know. Let them know about the Beyond the Wire podcast. We appreciate you. You can check us out on all major social media platforms as well as podcasting platforms, wherever you like to listen to those at. We appreciate you all for checking us out. And until next week, we'll be right back here on Beyond the Wire.